fun. There's the engineering feedback, right? Okay. I'm going to deliver this change today to find out if it breaks it. And then there's the business feedback. I'm going to deliver the smallest slice of this next feature to find out if it's valuable and deliver that and get feedback. But
figure out if it's safe to merge and whether it's safe to continue with these requirements.
Yeah. Just because it passes all the tests doesn't mean that it doesn't break something in production once it finally gets to a production environment. I try to have a high level of confidence, but we're never 100% sure.
Yeah.
And so we want to get feedback as rapidly as possible in the engineering thing. People tell me there's no value in delivering anything until it's feature complete. No. I know it's stable. I want to make sure we're on the right track. I don't want to invest too much money in this idea. I don't want to assume my idea is correct. I want to assume my idea is incorrect. It's a scientific experiment. I'm trying to invalidate the hypothesis. And we should be ecstatic when it's successful and just accept when it's not. Mm-hmm. And then how do we change course to make it to chase the value instead of just assuming value?
I would like to add something to the term of confidence. I think confidence doesn't mean that you are 100%, as you said, 100% safe to deploy. It's about to be confident that you can handle a situation even if something happened, but you expect feedback. So what you definitely get is feedback. And if the feedback is a negative, you can react quickly on that. So this is confidence. It's not about, oh, I'm 100% sure that nothing will happen. I think this is a big misconception.
No, I agree. And people focus on the wrong thing. I want to make sure that everything is perfect before we deliver. That's the wrong thing.
Who started the clip?
It's a new feature in StreamYard. I added it in
okay.
an intro. You can have intro and outro videos. When you go live, it automatically runs the clip.
I saw that. Now, okay, I was confused. God, I was clicking.
No, what we can do is we can, like, if you want, we can use some
create
of
a proper one.
Shorts. No, but we can use your snackable shorts and just put them in the studio as intros or outros. That way, when we run the stream, there isn't that we're going live and then you.
Yeah, but maybe I do a proper one. So
the volume.
I will create one, something. Let's do it. But this is a good idea, but in a proper way. So we have a little bit of context going around that we start soon, so that our valuable audiences don't think, hey, that's actually the show or something like that.
I added it last week. I didn't know it would persist over to the studio.
So hello everyone.
Your microphone is clipping slightly.
Clipping?
A little bit, yes.
What do you mean by clipping?
It's doing when you're saying P. And you're saying P. Yeah.
Huh?
It might just be a contact thing. If you can just play around with the cable a little bit, I think it'll resolve itself.
It's a USB cable.
Huh. That shouldn't be clipped. That shouldn't be the cause then. Well, I'll just keep you notified as we go. Okay. Welcome everybody. Technical issues aside, it's good to be back on a regular schedule.
That's live. That's normal. So we have a topic today: going SaaS. Yeah, that's actually a quite broad topic. So it was intentional because SaaS shall be the kind of hook where we all get hooked and talk about this topic. And the general idea behind that is to talk about, first of all, the difference between the traditional software creation and building a SaaS product, because there is a lot of difference. And there is a lot of difference in what kind of SaaS, right? You can do different SaaS models. And when we speak about SaaS or software as a service, we often think about the typical things where you pay for, let's say, 10, maybe 20 euros or dollars a month, and then you get something for that. So this is basically the B2C or sometimes B2B2C stuff, where we're using StreamYard right now, which is a SaaS product, right? So we use it, we have it, we pay for it. It's probably pay as you go sometimes, pay for a month, and then you are good to go. That's a product, which means that people are building a product, which means the developers are continuously building on a product instead of just creating or fulfilling wishes of clients, which is, in my experience, I want to talk about that today, the majority of years I had in my past, where there were clients who were building software for the clients. That the same happens in larger companies where the IT department is a department and fulfills those wishes for other departments or business departments, something like that. So you are basically a fulfillment thing there, a department. People who work towards goals are defined for you in an imperative approach. And for me, a good SaaS product, this is what we do today, mainly, is, built by intrinsic motivation of developers and seeing everyone as one big team. And this is what personally was driving me towards the change to go into that direction, just because of, in general, I think that the cultures and everything is better when you work on SaaS. But I can be wrong, and this can be just a personal perception I have. And let's discuss this today and talk a little bit about the history, how, or actually my experience, or probably you have some experience there 100% as well. So let's talk a little bit about this, how our journey there were, or when you were basically guiding companies towards that.
Most of my clients
are
clients are building SaaS products. Yeah.
Okay. So as always, for the audience people, leave us comments. We will go through the comments. We will, respond and discuss those, because this is always interesting to see what you actually have to say about that. Okay, Denis, when we think about SaaS, what is your perception, first of all? What is SaaS when you work with your clients? How is the company defining SaaS for themselves?
That's a good question. Defining for themselves, first of all, it's a revenue model. I think strategically from the business perspective, it is coming from this notion of what is being paid for. So you're not paying for a white labeled license of the software. You're not even paying for a license to host it locally. What you're paying for is some form of active service. Now, the active service could be API access. That's the most, let's say, common form of SaaS. But it can also be a license, install yourself software that also comes through API access or updates or support, like some premium service level features that are packaged together. So you cannot host the software on your own without having access to that service. That service might be SSO. It might be some form of AI integration. It's very popular nowadays. It might be a prepackaged form for customer support or updates or security measures. So that sort of covers all of my clients. Everybody is sort of somewhere in these categories. What's your experience? How does your company fit?
I come to that in a second. SaaS is, for me, in my world, or the first touches I had with that when I was talking with other business entrepreneurs 6-7 years ago, and they said, okay, we need to go away from the customized systems we build for our clients. That was mainly in the web to print area where we were. We are still there today. And there was you were building, let's say, very domain specific things for the client. So it fits into their domains. It is very much customized to their actual needs. It must be corporate design was something very important there. It must be totally brought into the design of everything else. It should be less like a seamless transition from one system into the other. Those kind of things we had. And people said, no, we need to actually have a product. We need to have a service. So actually we do a service, but we want to make that service more like that this is not built for them. They pay them and own it. It is more like we own it, but we basically build that for them to provide that service for them. And in the same moment, the customization idea was basically lowered, because you can't do that really in that scope. In the same moment, overall risk for the companies became smaller, and that was the idea how we started, so that actually the high barriers of customizing a system starts somewhere in the six-figure area. And with SaaS, you are probably in some form of 3 to 4 figure area per month. So in overall, when you say it in, let's say, 3 or 5 years, something like that, you are probably more expensive with SaaS, but less risky, which means that you could go out of contract already after 6 months. And that wasn't possible with building software in a traditional way, because you were owning that software. The entire liability was yours. And in terms of SaaS, the liability is on the provider side. That's one of the big, so this is how I got into the SaaS idea. And when we think about the idea then on the modern SaaS, because that was before the time when we saw SaaS everywhere. SaaS in form of apps in app stores, SaaS in form of you pay, or you basically leave a credit card or PayPal account or something like that, and you can suddenly use a specific tier of a software somewhere. For example, very first content management systems like that were Contentful, where you basically got a headless content management system and just pay for it per month. Those kind of things in the business-to-business area was very popular, is still very popular. And that was this typical when we then after that we had this micro SaaS things, where SaaS suddenly becomes popular and smaller because more startups and more small companies or even solopreneurs wanted to build and join this SaaS idea as well. So suddenly SaaS was more a kind of business to consumer thing rather than a business to business thing, it was starting as a business to business thing. And what I want to talk about today in my journey is the business-to-business aspect, because we are still in business-to-business. So we have built a solution which is called 𝗧cie𝗀𝗶𝘁𝘆. Right? We actually this is a German name. People think it's something to do with a bar. In reality, it isn't. It actually means something different. But it's kind of fun. And I think the interesting point there is that we have done a lot of legacy stuff and a lot of traditional solutions for many, many large and middle-sized clients. We do that until today, so we basically maintain those systems still. But one system after the other is going from this. Everyone wants to have his own domain, the own specifics, huge systems, this nitty-gritty stuff, and is going to one unified system with only some specific, let's say, toggles here, toggles there, some functions they can turn off and on, and they are happy with that as well for a fixed price in a month. That is actually a quite interesting story, because it seemed to be impossible to even think about 6 years ago. And I think, personally, that especially in the business-to-business area, that could be a good future, because everything you do regarding traditional software development, where you really customize things for clients, is totally obsolete, in my opinion, because it is simply a waste of money. The economy isn't working like that anymore. We don't have the golden age anymore. So we need to make sure we are, let's say, we work in economic constraints, and doing everything very customized for a client isn't very economical for both sides, because the client doesn't want to pay for that, and you, if you do it as any form of service for your client, you have the liability as a software company, which is the reason why so many typical agencies who just, let's say, build something for others and they don't own it, they often take shortcuts because of exactly that problem. Because in the beginning it's great, great revenue, something like that. in long term it's bad because there's no revenue anymore. So you start to take shortcuts. The quality suddenly drops, and you don't have that with a SaaS software because you are constantly in game, and you don't build it for the specific clients. You build a feature because you, as a provider, want to build a feature so that all your clients can use that feature. Sometimes you see, oh, that feature is actually well accepted. And sometimes you see, actually, we thought that would be a great feature, but we found out by feedback that this isn't great. No one really want to have that. Then they even remove that feature again. And this is very new to me. And this is what really let things like agile and continuous delivery, let it shine, because you really need those processes in order to create successful SaaS. Okay, that was the big wrap up now for the story. What do you think? Do you think I'm right, or do you? No, not right, but can you resonate with the story, or have you experienced it differently? That would be interesting for me, though.
I mean, I did work with a lot of agencies as well. You know, from a SaaS perspective, agencies always, I don't know, either built a SaaS-like product, but then didn't build for it. You know, back in the day, you would normally build software, turnkey, build for it once, and then you would sort of hook the client with some kind of maintenance contract, right? So there would be maintenance for the servers it was hosted on. Maybe there would be maintenance to maintain certificates. Maybe there would be maintenance for keeping the lights on or for routine activity. But it was sort of, like an SLA just to keep everything running for continued operation, so that this would be, you know, so you essentially, you know, from an accounting perspective, you would be looking at it as amortization and maintenance rather than continued development. But the amortization and maintenance was continued development. But then to the team, it didn't appear as product engineering. It appeared as that maintenance contract. So it wasn't really clear where the margin was being made. And a lot of agency-style companies did live more off of the maintenance contracts than the actual development contracts, because the development processes in agencies are so inherently inefficient. They're being underpriced, and they're sort of strategically being badly marketed. Like in my experience, you know, no client will want to pay the proper cost of building the software because they don't really understand the full cost of ownership. And then the maintenance contracts become profitable if the relationship becomes so long-term that you go into the period where no work for maintenance is necessary, but they're still paying for it. And I think the SaaS model really changes the timing of that. So it really upfronts that SaaS model of, no, like, you will need some maintenance, you will need customer support, and you will need product engineering. And we package that all together so that what you're paying for is to have a relationship with the company, and the company does everything it needs to do, rather than it being time and materials for any kind of incision that needs to be done. That also means that incisions need to be smaller. So as you said, there needs to be a fit prior to custom development. You know, the fit cannot be build an MVP for us, and then we see if we can work together, and then you guys can maintain for it, right? So it has to be, the product already has to be there. The product already has to solve the majority of the problem for the client, and then they buy that, and what they're paying for is continuous service. You know, similar to how we use StreamYard, as you mentioned earlier, right? Like, I don't care how many engineers it takes to keep StreamYard operational. I don't care how many hours they devote to keep my stuff going for bug fixes or any other security issues. What I do care is that I don't want to pay for usage. I just want to pay for continued operation. And for me, continued operation on a monthly or yearly model is very reasonable. More reasonable than, let's say, I can calculate it. I can sort of predict expenses. And it's more reasonable than, say, me having to go through a branding agency and say, hey, I want to rent a studio and streaming software and bandwidth. What's the package? And I need to pay for that. And then I keep maintaining that, you know, possibly even through a handshake and through a physical contract agreement.
It's
which
less
is how it was
personal.
typically done. Which is how it was typically done.
It's
Which
less
is great for
personal.
the.
Yeah.
It is great for that personal touch, but it is much more friction prone because if StreamYard doesn't work well, I can replace it with something else, over the course of a weekend. In a typical brick and mortar sort of contract style engagement, you would generally stick to a bad provider because the cost of changing providers would be so large. Because you would have to reestablish that physical relationship.
That was the risk management I was mentioning. I even heard that from clients. That was interesting. We were talking for quite a while about a migration from a legacy system which needs to be replaced into a new system. And I think we negotiated 18 months or something like that. And the price was simply too high for that because they already paid for that. It was actually not planned. That was a security thing because of a software they use and stuff like that, something like that. And then the interesting part is a quite high amount per month was suddenly totally fine, which is way more expensive than the other one. But you could, the risk mitigation actually made this topic something a way lower manager could decide, and this decision needs to be brought up like high to make that decision on a higher level. That was an interesting learning for my side, that especially in business to business area, decisions are often made like amount of money in period of time, which means that how much will we pay in the first year and can we basically switch? So what you just mentioned, like we do on a smaller scale with StreamYard, larger companies do as well. So if that is not a big problem and everything is pretty standardized, so the risk can be, let's say, I would say the risk is in a spectrum where people say yes to something like that, which is, in my opinion,
it's easier to say yes to working with somebody rather than having a big upfront development contract.
Exactly.
Because then the development contracts usually run into all these time and, especially in Germany, in the DACH region, Germans especially, it's horrible. It's really difficult. Like German clients can be really difficult, and I'm sorry, I have some German clients, but you guys are something special. You're very digitally savvy. You like paper, so you do like paper contracts, and you want your paper contracts to be translated to German, which is very, it's very annoying. You're very upfront and you're very diligent, very precise, but also very anal about the freaking bureaucracy and certificates and, just the general upfront bureaucracy involved with, with setting up even a SaaS engagement. It's a license contract, but there is that aversion to monthly costs. You would prefer my German clients would prefer full-time employment over coaching. They would prefer time and materials over SaaS licensing. They would prefer upfront workshop rather than ongoing coaching. So I see equivalence along all of these tracks. That I don't see, with my Italian, Portuguese, US clients, Eastern Europe clients.
What the Germans really love to do, or the German-speaking people actually, is to own something, which means
to own something. Exactly. So it's more of that traditional ownership structure of no, I just want to pay for it, and then either I have it, and then that's a salary.
They treat software like building a house. It's a little bit. They have invested once quite a large amount of sum. That's totally fine. And then it shall, maybe in 30 years we do the first renovation, something like that. But with software, it's pretty, let's say, it's coming way earlier, and everyone is pretty upset in Germany that we need to rebuild it, we just build it. And so the idea of continuous improvement, continuous whatever is not really given. So we don't even have a word for that in German. We don't use it. So you could translate it.
Continuous doesn't translate well to German.
We don't use it. It is very odd to use it. So you can, of course. It's the same with ownership. I was posting that today. The word ownership isn't used in German. So what you say that is more, it sounds like slavery. but you don't do that. So you have responsibility, but not ownership. And in the other moment, you don't have this terminology either. And that is something which is very special, since we are a German company, and at least a good portion of our clients are still German and will be German. It is, of course, a little bit different to convince them to buy something which they don't buy. So they buy a service per month instead of a solution, because they the idea of, and I understand that, the idea is, hey, I build something or buy something which is a foundation of my company, or this is the idea about that, and it's
So
we don't own it. So,
it.
or this is a trust problem, and what are the buyout options in case you don't exist? So we have all of this. So basically have options that we, if something happens to our company, that they basically own that stuff. That's something like a failover bailout thing in case of fire, when shit hit the fan scenarios hit in. So these kind of securities you need to have, otherwise it doesn't work. And it is a little bit like with modern companies, it's way easier to do that because they think more like their business is transformational anyway. So it is continuously transforming. It is today something different than it will be in 5 years. Germany and the DACH region, like Austria and Switzerland and maybe a little bit of Netherlands as well, is very much traditional, which means it is more like industrial age thinking than modern age thinking, which means that we build something and we do exactly that for the next 20 years. That's what we want to do. And that's how we want to grow. It's actually like, it is more like it looks a little bit like stagnation, but it's growing, and that's great. Because that is stability. That's the wrong sense of stability, which isn't very well working currently because the economy is not that stable anymore, and suddenly this model isn't that great. So we have, and we see that on the market you have those companies now, especially the younger generations who take over now, they think differently. They are way more connected to the English-speaking mentality than the older generations. Well, it will take some time until we see that more often happen. And especially some of the larger corporations in Germany, which are not like the large enterprises, but more the corporations of middle-sized companies, they think like that as well. And I'm pretty happy that this is the case, because I see a big portion of our future there. And the reason is because those companies work internationally, and so they have a different mindset. Though all the companies who just work locally, of course, they stay in the mindset they are used to stay, and that's kind of a long thing. So that SaaS is actually something we plan to go more internationally than actually staying with the German market, to be very honest, because it is way easier to find clients on the British market. For example, we found several British clients, partners. So we call them partners, actually. In SaaS, it's more like being partner than clients in the B2B area, because on some point you do some customizations, but very specific is a little different. And the interesting part is you can even sell a British person, that's my experience, a SaaS product, which is actually a customized product, but you sell it as a SaaS product, and they are happy with that, right? And I had that in nearly every conversation, right? It took a while, and when they understood that, they did, that's great. We could even scale that, and we can do that with many of our products. And yes, we can do that. It's great. They see opportunity. And in Germany, we just have found a handful of people who are actually willing to do that. And able to understand where the actual advantage in that moment is. That's long story short.
I mean, scale is one of the bigger issues with the SaaS licensing model, because it's not quite clear, at what point does more usage or more teams or more directors or more, more founder involvement, at what point does it reach some form of threshold? For example, with StreamYard, it doesn't go endlessly up. At a certain point, you need to say, hey, I need a custom package, and then you need to sit down with the sales team, and they have to sort of revert to that transition, to that traditional operational model for example, for a large enterprise, because this is also very B2C facing, B2C, B2B facing. So there is a very much, with SaaS products, there is a very much sort of direct to customer approach. Even with your kind of solutions, there it might be targeted at a individual, at a director level rather than an organization, so that they make contact with that first. I use a similar pricing model for my coaching services. Right, so it's not just coaching per session. It's also access to my newsletter. It's also access to my platform from chat. It's also access to a community of like-minded technologists. So there is a wider audience involved rather than just time and materials. So I really like that, at least outside of Germany, this is sort of picking up, and it does working very well. On the side of, well, before we go too much into the pricing model, is there anything in the show agenda for today that you'd like to address more explicitly?
Not so far. I wanted to keep it as a conversation, and it might make sense. So we haven't had any form of comment so far today.
We had a bot, but I think that's...
No, we won't show the bot.
Yeah, the bot was, I think, irrelevant to the conversation.
It is.
But hello bot.
Hello bot, right? No, it's I don't expect too much because this is a very complex topic, very personal topic of ours now, and we would just want to take the time today to explain that a little bit to you so that you can learn and understand what the thought processes are there, because it is not very common, especially when we have the majority of our audience as both developers. And developers are often part of such an endeavor, but not really on the business level where I am talking about right now. But what is...
Well, it's interesting. So what I did find, regarding what you just said, I did see a lot of even traditional companies that have traditional pricing models adopt a surrogate SaaS model for baking some form of LLM, Gen AI, or a ChatGPT wrapper into their product, and they are modeling their product, this secondary product, on top of ChatGPT's or OpenAI's basically SaaS API, right? So ChatGPT offers a SaaS API, GitHub Copilot offers a SaaS API. So these services can be wrapped, and a lot of companies are doing so. So even though their core business is not a SaaS product, they do now have, by extension, either credits or some form of SaaS support or SaaS upgrade to, for example, you can buy WebStorm, and the whole 𝗏𝗏𝗏 suite is a good example, right? You can buy it for a year. That's like a normal license. You have to receive upgrades for the new major version, and they do promise a major version every year. Or you can also upgrade to a monthly license to get access to their premium Gen AI, if you prefer it, if you prefer theirs over a ChatGPT wrapper. Right. So that's for example the, let's say, least intrusive, sort of low friction alternative to just putting AI into something. And I think the jump to AI wasn't so much to put AI into products primarily. It was to put a SaaS business model into their traditional products. Like the pull to do that was more important than having Gen AI in, let's say, 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏.
Yeah.
Just because it offers a very low risk form of financial upsell that helps all of these companies mitigate their operational risk. And they do have operational risk, things like StreamYard, they need constant maintenance, continuous delivery, documentation updates, API updates, translations, customer support. Even if we bought the software off the shelf, you would still need to maintain it. You know, even things you are used to buying off the shelf, things like, I don't know, Office, Microsoft Windows. Nowadays, they're service products, and you're sort of periodically, cyclically buying licenses for them. You're just not aware of it, just because it's still following the traditional spectrum. Office 365 is a bit different, but Office 365 comes with a whole bunch of other operational complexity, at least in corporations.
We have some topics actually. Our 4 topics were promised in the description. I would like to go over them.
Okay.
And the first one would be, let's post it here. Yep. That one.
Why rethinking is
essential to become SaaS. So we talked about the differences in the beginning, SaaS and traditional. And the differences for us were that we were starting as, let's say, a fulfillment department. And I know that to the time I was working with other companies and other, let's say, development departments, they felt the same. So no one was using the terminology, we are a development department, we are development or something like that. We are actually the IT department. We were doing the IT stuff, right? The computer stuff. And no one was understanding that. And when you don't understand things, what you do actually is you treat it a little bit like a black box. You try to tell the black box imperatively what you do. That's a big thing. And when we think about SaaS is very much, if it's not a great product you build, then no one will buy it. It's a little bit like the competitive part. This is less bound to a specific domain and less bound to a specific client or customer. And that's the interesting point. So the rethinking here is that you need to think about the product as an entire team. So every developer needs to think about how can we basically create a better product, which makes it very much important to get feedback straight from the consumers of the product, which can be the clients, the users, the customer, whatever, who is ever using that product. And that's the interesting aspect. So the rethinking aspect is all the modern things we're talking about, or I talk, for example, about on LinkedIn every day, like the continuous delivery approach, leadership approaches, ownership driven instead of traditional deadline driven approaches. Those kind of things are all because of our SaaS journey. It's a little bit like that, because I believe that the mindset of building a SaaS product is the product we should have had already in the traditional sense, but we hadn't. And today we have the big chance when we work on products, on real products, which we sell as a SaaS service. So we have the entire liability of building and delivering that and make sure it's growing, it gets better and stuff like that. Then we have the intrinsic motivation as developers, as software developers in general, that can be non-coding persons as well, like the product management, the product owners, it's a developer as well in some sense. So we are intrinsically motivated to understand if what we do is actually working and does have impact or not, in order to iterate and have a better life. That is actually a very good point. And in the traditional space, and I work a lot with the traditional space still, in mentorings and stuff like that, the problem there is no one thinks like that. It is all about this, yeah, we have a ticket here, let's focus on this, get this ticket somehow done in the deadline. That is my main concern I have. And this is what I actually don't like. And this is what I mean by we need to rethink about that. Never mind. That's some technical issue right now. I'm flickering a little bit today. But
I think everybody's flickering. I think I'm having some issues as well. It might just be StreamYard. It might just be an update, and maybe we should change browsers. Maybe it's a Chrome issue. I don't know.
Okay. Then, do you want to respond something to that, or shall we go to the next topic?
No, I think let's go to the next one.
Okay.
We've already covered this in the.
The next one was already something we had as what's the traditional agency business, and what were the challenges? That's actually, let's copy paste that into that one here. and have that one. So what were the challenges? So the challenges were that we were so much in the mindset of being a fulfillment department that it was quite hefty for us to get out of that. Which means that it is not like every developer in our company was really willing to take the ownership and responsibility now. Some were getting used to it, and it's like, oh, it's totally fine to be quiet. But you can't make a transition to be not quiet if everyone wants to be quiet. So you can't just say, okay, we have a new thing, we built now that instead of that, and everyone, okay, let's do this. It's not working like that. It is a very long tradition you need to break in that moment and start to build a new culture. That is actually quite... so I started... go ahead.
My first job, real job, was working in an agency, and it was a branding agency that specialized in communication strategy and in IT communication strategy, right? So building up branding websites, changing government pages, digitalizing, typical paper run processes. I was in the engineering department, and there were 20 engineers in the engineering department, and you would mistake that for a tech company. It was just a hyper-scaled cost center, right? It was just, we were able to service 10 clients at a time, 2 engineers for each client. But it wasn't a tech company that had 2 or 3 teams surrounding a product. There was an internal product, which was the in-house framework we built. Everybody was building their in-house frameworks in 2004 because there weren't any very good ones that were full stack. Yes, exactly, right? So every agency in 2004 to 2008 built their own frameworks. The frameworks is something that you sub-licensed in part of working with you. So the custom development came with, again, that very much traditional anti-SaaS operational model. Because nobody would rent the software unless they were getting your custom engineering and communication strategy support with it, because the software wasn't good enough for that. The software was just there for you to save operational costs for you running your own company, because you've optimized processes using the platform that you've built. But nobody actually wants to rent the software that isn't working with you, right? Like I think that's a big shift, that's the main challenge going from agency, I think, to SaaS, is to create those teams. It's to say, oh, we have 20 engineers, but it's no longer, solving 10 or 15 different custom implementations for each one of our clients, but it's actually, we actually have teams now, and they're maintaining key pillars in our SaaS technology. That's a huge shift for any such agency. And some agencies don't make that shift. Some agencies work very well, but then they do other things. Maybe they consult, maybe they have branding strategists, maybe they have designers. This company that I work for, they doubled down. They said, no, we're just not going to do custom engineering as much, but we are also not going to have a SaaS product. They just said they're going to go more into coaching, more into consulting, and they don't want to, they would prefer not minding too much business regarding time and materials for custom engineering. So they went to the low-code, no-code solutions, platform solutions. It became more of this having a CMS of choice that they can tweak, and then contributing to that CMS through the open source community that maintains it. And I see a lot of, WordPress is alive because of that. In this particular case of this agency, they chose Silver Stripe, but you also see this with other frameworks or CMSs or CRMs or ERPs. You see this in specialized software for accounting. You see this in specialized software for running ads. Facebook essentially created a whole ecosystem. Their ads manager and various different SaaS tools that then help with automating these workflows. I think that's then the next step up. You just create platforms once you have large enough scale. I also worked in advertising, so I sort of saw the advent of SaaS companies basically creating SaaS tools for automation regarding when you're scheduling a certain post, when you're scheduling a certain ad, how the ad is generated, how the workflow tools are sort of, running Google ads, but, clamping down on the, saving on the budget on the non-performing ads, trickling the budget into the ones that are performing. So it has this sort of more data-driven, agile feel to it, rather than being a strict run experiment, run project, finish project, run project, next billing cycle, finish project. In software, that creates operational cadences that are very much rigid and slow. Software is, especially when something goes wrong, you don't want to be tied to a project contract because it makes course correction very difficult or legally complicated.
Especially when things go wrong and you need, this is where the terminology of technical debt gets into as well. When things, you can plan them out in the beginning, but the contracts are not really like, hey, you have a lot of buffer and whatever comes during that, it will be covered by that. Normally it isn't the case, so the buffer isn't really helping you there. And the idea of agile contracts is very young, and especially in the German market, pretty unknown. So that you actually don't think in 2 years, 3 years of building something upfront or something like that. You're rather thinking in working closely together to go from month to month, right? And improve. So it is more like you are committed to take a look what's actually best thing to do. You don't know yet, and you don't pretend to know. And that's a big difference. And I think especially in the traditional sense, which many companies still are, it is very hard to convince people of that this is actually a good idea to do it iteratively. And that is because people need to invest their money, personal risk, and they want to know, like an investment, what it will be. And that is the problem, that no one knows, and we try to, but it's actually never happening. And it results in very bad cultures. It results in those typical software agencies and departments where people hide themselves. They try to hide their work. They try to hide bugs. They try to push the responsibility away, because that is what actually counts for them. That is not how great products actually come into being. So all the great products we see out there today, we use them today as SaaS products, were built, and you see that in an intrinsic motivation, which means that you see those little improvements where you think, oh, that's actually cool. I have that with Descript. I use it daily for creating videos. And when I started, I think a year ago, using that software, I think it had half of the features it has today. And so many great new features. And I never told them my feedback so far. And there's so much going on, and I really appreciate, I basically trust them to make that software even better in the next 12 months. And that is what the SaaS mindset is about, right? So I am happy to pay the price per month. If they would, please don't do that, but if they would raise the price for it, I would even pay for it, because it saves me.
But StreamYard, for example, did, right? So StreamYard got acquired. And one of the first things the new owners did were doubling the price, essentially, or quadrupling the price, depending on, they improved service a little bit and doubled the price for your tier. So if you want the new goodies and are okay with the price change, then your monthly price has quadrupled, which is quite a steep change. You would go from 3 figures per year to 4, which is a very steep budget change, just for having access to the software. That I think is a bad example. It definitely made me more averse to StreamYard. But I understand. Like, I would rather pay a lot of money to something like Descript that offers a very good service, even at a higher price point, compared to buying something permanently and then being unhappy with it or having no refund policy, or having to sort of put together an equivalent service with multiple smaller SaaS products. So to me, having one area where I can just merge it all together, because the issue with all these SaaS products is that they come with workspaces, and at a certain point, it just becomes very difficult to synchronize everything across workspaces. Which is why Office 365 is such a huge monopoly when it comes to Teams and everything that's sort of baked into that ecosystem of Salesforce has a different strategy there, but sort of that's where it's all coming from, and we see this with SaaS products, with PaaS products like AWS, where one of the big things is that you can sort of bring your entire organization on and then just spin up services and backup things, share things more easily, but it does become a maintenance hazard at a certain point. For us smaller creators and smaller sort of tech consultancies, agencies, the primary issue is when we're being billed per usage or per seat, and I have temporary workforce, right? So if I have a video editor and they need access 2 hours per month, that's a full month seat access that I can't bill on a smaller granularity, which becomes much more wasteful to sort of optimize. I would still prefer not billing per usage hourly, but it does encourage account sharing, which is the whole problem with these seat models.
Okay, last question for today. Not question.
That's the last point.
The point, how we started and where we are. So I'm building as a responsible person for now 15 years, nearly 15 years software. And most of the time was traditional. I would even say that 5 years ago, around about 5 years ago, we started to have the plan to switch. We need to go out of that thinking of we are an IT department or fulfillment agency thing, something like that, and go into the idea of creating that SaaS product, having that new mindset, building that. Actually, it wasn't that clear to that time that we need to have a different mindset for that. That came later during the process, but it started about 5 years ago. And I would say it was a mumbling process. It's a little bit like today, SaaS seems to be much more clear than it was in the past. But if we are all honest, the SaaS idea is a very young one, which means that the clarity we have today wasn't the same clarity we had 5 years ago. 5 years ago, all the JetBrains software were still a license model. And today we all think about, there are still licenses, something like that. You can still have them. It's a little bit like the time flies quite by here in that moment. What I want to say by that is when you want to change a paradigm in your company, the mindset, how you build things, it takes a while. And I was having my keynote on the CloudFest about this. One of the aspects was to become cloud native. We were still totally traditional with server racks, Windows servers. I hate those. I really hate those. And having the idea of, okay, you need to let go the responsibility of the infrastructure and let that be done by someone outside of your company, like an infrastructure provider, like the large cloud providers, or even go then cloud native. So that was the next step. So doing that one by one, we were basically going from Windows Server, IIS, and Apache stuff, Nginx to running Docker Swarm, then Kubernetes, and now we're doing PaaS, right? And that was one of those. And the other is how we develop things, like going from some weird SVN thing of developing in systems and creating update zips and stuff like that to continuous delivery, continuous integration, trunk-based development. We had trunk-based development actually as well, but we were not aware of that. So become aware of that, make that part of the mindset, and really align that to the idea of the agile development, which was to get the idea and the feedback of the clients and iterate on that. And we found out that everything you can read and about the modern ways of working with software methodologies, like continuous delivery, for example, they all fit perfectly together for this idea, because this is the logical outcome of all of these things. And that was, I think, the most significant part to make that transformation, to get everyone on board and make it happen, and make people understand that this is the better way to do, because everyone is supposed or opposed to change. When you come like, hey, we're doing now everything differently. And we had that so often that people were then saying, or especially developers. So we had PHP back then and 𝗧C# as the main core things, and vanilla JS for the front end. And suddenly you said, yeah, okay, but now we need to go to, we had React then. We still have React, but in the back end, then we said, okay, but we need to change. That was totally fine, right? And then we said, yeah, but on the back end, we probably then go for something in JavaScript as well to make that more streamlined and easy for us to just have one language. And then was a little bit like, oh, what? Can we even use JavaScript on the back end, stuff like that? And we already made the transition to Docker, which was totally new for especially the people who use Windows machines and get WSL running, install Docker somehow. Those kind of things were quite interesting. There were so many things people needed to change that, of course, there was a lot of resistance as well. The developers simply didn't want to. Interestingly, today they wouldn't go back, right? And that's, I think, the fun part of the story is that we have a lot of resistance. It's purely resistance because there is no reason to hold back, because let's be honest that since we have moved away, we still have the same major version of PHP. There's nothing new so far. And when we take a look on the other ecosystems, we see a lot of moving parts there, which was in the beginning a little bit chaotic, and today it's pretty much advantageous, right? So you have a giant ecosystem which pushes you and helps you and empowers you to do things, and developers don't want to go back. That's definitely something. No one wants to go back and host manually on an Nginx or use something like PM2 or something like that to host your...
But these tools are also very young. Like we talk about, I did a post today and I'm going to follow up today regarding continuous delivery on LinkedIn. And, Docker is a very young technology. This whole idea of containerization,
it is actually
hasn't been around, and it sort of assumes that it should be normal, that all teams should be using Dockerized, sort of continuously integrating at least environments. But then you have equivalents like DDEV for PHP. Like LAMP was the initial automated environment setup that wasn't containerized, just because nobody sort of knew how to containerize something reliably. Then Docker came along and basically killed the MAMP, WAMP, and LAMP stacks for PHP. And then something hybrid emerged from that stack, and sort of sticks around for people who don't want full Dockerization, who are sort of still stuck in those old workflows. But I don't think people resist technologies per se. There is resistance to a lack or a bad development experience in the transition period. Which is what I decided to specialize on as a coach. Just the experience of the transition, of the transformation. Like the end result we know is very good. We have scientific evidence for continuous delivery, trunk-based development, TDD, all these things, and even alternatives, right? So you can get the benefits of TDD without doing TDD if you're doing one of the more planning-heavy alternatives, like event modeling, for example, right? So that you might even consider them mutually exclusive, or event sourcing, event storming, not event storming without sourcing, but the actual proper domain-driven design that goes from metal to business strategy. but not a lot of companies work like that because they have never been exposed to a very easy transition into that mode of operation, because the experience of transitioning sucked, so they never really transformed. They just kept doing what they were doing and what works. I had a talk about this on StripeCon a month ago. Yeah, about a month ago. The recording is live now on YouTube on StripeCon. It's titled Creating Value, and I was talking about alternatives to the agency pricing model, and specifically alternatives to the hourly based pricing model typical in software agencies. You mentioned SaaS products. I also introduced, played with this idea of outcome-based pricing that I'm doing for my coaching as well.
Can you share a link here?
I've closed down everything for performance. I had some video issues. I don't have it open right now.
Okay.
But it's youtube.com.
I haven't watched that video so far. I need to do that still. This is the reason.
Yeah, it's on my LinkedIn. You can find it on my LinkedIn. So
okay.
Nobody clicks these links anyway, because it's just for, you can find it. Statistically speaking, even if I give you the link, you're not going to watch it right now, and so stay here. No, but the point of that talk was that there's resistance to going away from hourly billing. So there is resistance away from going to this transitional way of working, because it forces more maturity onto the engineers, right? It sort of forces you to be more strategic. Because you can't. Same problem with the agile pricing model, right? Agile contracts, you said, are very unusual. I have a comment as well in chat saying, I think you shouldn't go to SaaS. It is already old. Micro SaaS and ecosystems and marketplace is the next good thing. 1 hour is over. See you. Yeah, I think there is this operational model that I see a lot from like tech gurus and YouTubers, where they put their, let's say, 1 decade of experience in the tech space as a freelancer into use. Instead of offering services, they build a SaaS and then they sell it. Right? So they grow a product, they use product like growth, build a landing page, test an idea, build something up as a ChatGPT wrapper or using low-code tools, validate it, scale it, and then automate it so that they can sell it to somebody, right? So they sell a very small company for a few millions, rather than the big, So it's bootstrapped. It's just their own labor with some operational costs in there from the initial growth of the initial users, and then they sell it for a few millions or $500,000, and then they do it again, And then if they can do 1 cycle in like a few years, this then becomes a reasonable solo or 2-person business operational model for somebody living in Europe.
But is that now in relation to that comment? As a response?
That's in relation to the comment, because that's what the micro SaaS ecosystem is. You just build a micro SaaS and like flag it on acquire.com, and then somebody acquires you, not a percentage, but the entire company, somebody just buys you for $400K. You pay some taxes on that, and then it's just like, okay, next one. It's very modern. I found it wasn't very scalable. Like, this is something that solo engineers and consultants do as an exit from their career. Haven't seen companies really do this. It's not a reasonable setup. There's way too much red tape involved. This is what works very well at scale, and that's why we have investors, angel investors, and VCs. They just simply have way larger budgets to play this game at a much higher level that guarantees much better results. So that's one aspect. Regarding outcome-based billing, I think the best approach is, just encourage more maturity from your teams, engineering teams, product engineering teams. Agility isn't so much about billing sprints or billing, a month of owning the team or a month of the team's time. An agile contract would be, the client essentially taking a bet and you're taking that bet with them. And then you say, I have this budget to have an attempt to improve conversion rates. Okay, what target do we want? If we spend the budget and we don't reach the target, we do it at a loss, or we return something, or you take the full risk and we give you a discount. Or if they do achieve the goal, they say, once we achieve this goal, project ends, and we take the remaining budget as margin for our success. Then if you want another project, that's another billing cycle. Those are very good outcome-based billing models. For example, I've recently hired Jonathan. I just sent you a message. You have to jump in 5 minutes. Yeah, I'm not going to go on a tangent then. Good call. You want to end now, then we quickly debrief?
I would say let's quickly wrap up. Probably debrief maybe a little later, but
then let's
we can
debrief
wrap
next
up.
week, and because I'm preparing the next one anyway. So next
one
week
will
is
be?
going to be. I'm not sure. I need to check my notes. Well, that's why we made the notes. Let me
Notion.
check real quick.
We use a SaaS product called Notion.
Yes.
The world's
Can you check real quick?
slowest wiki-like collaboration software.
It didn't load for me today. I don't know why.
It is so slow. It's always so slow.
And first load is very slow.
Huh? Where is it? Content board. Use planning accuracy to build continuous delivery hype in your team.
Well, that's going to tie in very well to this discussion about outcome-based pricing and the talk I had on StripeCon to replace hourly billing, more actual agility rather than like these fake agile framework kinds of agility, which is just typical PMI and old traditional project management, sort of using capital A agile as a vessel for selling certificates. Yeah, so that's going to be next week. Happy to wrap here. Do more SaaS, get away from hourly billing, and look for alternatives or at least additions to your typical agency pricing model. I think that would be the best takeaway for this episode.
Exactly. In my wrap up, because the last comment as well, I think it's wrong what's written there, at least the first sentence. Between micro SaaS, between traditional SaaS, whatever that is, and there are a lot of differentiations. So SaaS is not SaaS. SaaS is a very broad topic. So you could even say that the PaaS platform you use at DigitalOcean is a SaaS software, right? You use something which other people provide. So that is not old, that is not new, that is timeless. So you need to go into the direction because everything else is not standardized and no one can plan. I think the biggest sickness we have right now in the software industry is or are all the things where, let's say, we try to predict the future, and instead of breaking it down to something agile per month, we basically say, okay, we need to predict something and we build it so that someone can own it. So that's the traditional sense of we need to own the system we build, we need to predict it, we need to plan things. In reality, we need to go with time. We can't predict the future. We don't know how 2030 will look like for the industry, for the software development industry. So we need to invent systems which are flexible enough to change together with the time, with the zeitgeist. And SaaS software is something like that. I would even say that is even more like a SaaS software, like we build right now, won't become a legacy solution as long as we have an incentive to build on it. And this is the big difference. Traditional software is basically legacy in the moment when the initial payment is done and the initial development in version 1 is done, you actually have a legacy system. And that is what what is part of this big sickness, how I experienced it. So I personally strongly believe in the idea of you should own the system. So the software development companies should own the entire liability and have an incentive of making it great so everyone can buy it and is willing to buy it. And that is the big difference, and which is timeless in my opinion there. That's an ideal. But actually I have to go. Thank you very much for listening today, and see you next Wednesday, same time.
Next Wednesday, same time.
Goodbye, everyone. Let's have some elevator music when I find the buttons. There it is.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
See you next week.